Hello, everyone,
I'm Carl.
and I'm Em.
Welcome to our podcast discussing all of the latest books. This is our 20th episode, and we'll be discussing Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren, the big 2-0, which seems crazy. We'll be saving our ratings until the very end.
We promise to give you all of our honest opinions on all the characters, chapters, and scenarios. We don't mean any harm to any of the authors. This is solely our opinion. And as always, we promise to call them like we read them.
Period. So, this book does not have any trigger warnings in the beginning, but it absolutely should. There is references to death of a parent at a young age. Mom and dad, I think she was 10 and 18, so pretty young for both, honestly. There's references to potential sexual assault. There's references to depression. Anything else you can think of?
There's several instances of sexual content as far as like deep discussions about it, not really the act of it.
Yeah.
Heavy drinking.
Oh, drug abuse, abandonment,
Mhm.
heartbreak, if that's considered a trigger. Cheating, I guess. But that's mixed in with the potential sexual assault reference. So, anything else that you can think of?
Not coming to me at the moment.
Okay. All right. Well, and as always, spoilers will lie ahead.
So if you don't want to hear how this book ends, please pause here, go read the book, and then come back to this episode, which we both agree this was a pretty good one to read. So definitely would recommend reading it. It is on Audible if you want to also listen to it as well. So are you ready to get started?
Let's get into it. Okay, so I'm going to read just a little introduction in the back of the book, just for a little reminder of what the book's about. When Macy and her dad move into their weekend home in the wine country outside of San Francisco, little do they realize how dramatically this decision will impact the rest of their lives. It is in this house that Macy first falls in love with her neighbor Elliot and comes to understand the complexity of love and heartache. The novel is told in two timelines. In the past, when Macy's mom has just died and her father is searching for a weekend home to help heal their fractured family. And in the present, when Macy and Elliot run into each other suddenly after being estranged for almost 11 years. At once thrilling and heart wrenching, Love in Other Words is a celebration of the fragility of love, the beauty of literature, and the strength of true friendship to overcome anything.
All right, so we are again going to try something a little bit different. So we are going to summarize the book into separate parts and then discuss those parts from there. So we're going to try that to kind of get a little bit smoother talking points, but also so we get everything kind of context in the book in our discussions. So the first half of the book, like Carly said in the introduction, Macy's mom has passed when she was about 10 from cancer. Her dad was given a list by her mother of like hints that see her into adulthood. So one of those was that she has a getaway home, is I think what is referenced to a couple times. And so because of it, she ends up meeting Elliot, who lives next door. He becomes her everything friend. In the flashback, Macy and Elliot spend a lot of time together reading, bonding. Macy falls for Elliot the closer they get. Macy also gets jealous when his ex shows up at the house and they end up kissing for the first time. And then in the present, she stops talking to him because of some big event, which we don't know exactly what that is just yet in the first half. And she runs into him in a coffee shop and actually ends up running away from him as well. And later she agrees to meet up with him and they discuss the relationship. And eventually she decides to give being friends a try, invited him to hang out with her friends. And as Macy starts realizing her feelings never went away from him, she ends up trying to figure out how to navigate her engagement with her fiance, as well as Elliot inviting her to his brother's wedding as his date, but as a friend, in a sense. That's quotations if you're not watching. So kind of to start it off with, whenever they first get to the house, when they're being shown the house and she ends up running into Elliot in the closet. First
Their
of
little, like,
all,
meet cute.
Yes. I loved that. I love that he found kind of peace in this closet that her dad thought she would have in the same closet. So I thought that was absolutely adorable. I did find it a little weird that she didn't like scream that there was like some hidden boy in the closet though. Like I do find that I would probably be a little bit more creeped out than she was by it, but I guess that's just my personal thoughts, I guess. But I thought it was super cute. I loved that the closet was kind of, because I do think it was a good reflection of their relationship. Like their relationship was very closeted in a way. Obviously, they had their own individual lives basically outside of the closet and everything. So I did think that that was extremely cute concept, as well as like analogy, I guess you can say, that related back to that.
My only thing about the closet is that I kind of wish we would have done a little bit better, like, with the imagery of the closet. I just kept
Hmm.
picturing this tiny little closet and could not figure out how it had shelves and books and 2 teenage kids. Like, I could like, the layout of it didn't make any sense to me, so I would have liked a little bit more of a description of that. I get, though, like, she's a kid, like, she's probably not thinking of that, so in her point of view, would have been a little weird maybe, but, like, also, like, where are her clothes compared to the book? Like, I don't know. I wanted more of a description of that.
Okay, so I imagine like Harry Potter's closet under the stairs, but like elongated. And so like I imagine where they laid was like where the like slope in the ceiling was, and
Mhm.
then like the rest of it was like shelves with that. And then I imagine her just having like a separate closet, because it almost, it made it seem to me like she was overtaking the master bedroom. So I was thinking there was maybe like a secondary closet or something like that, because they made it seem like it was like the biggest room in the house kind of emphasis.
Okay.
So that was my imagery of the closet.
Okay. I can see that.
Along elongated Harry Potter's closet.
It doesn't surprise me that you thought closet and you thought of Harry Potter.
It was my first and only imagery.
That was your first and only for the
Yeah.
closet or the entire book?
No, for the closet.
Okay, just making sure.
In the present tense, get into where Macy had met up with Sabrina at a coffee shop, and basically Sabrina is meeting up with her to talk her out of marrying Sean, because she doesn't seem to quite like Sean, which it doesn't seem like he was very involved in honestly anything of her life. I think
Mm-mm,
they said that at
agreed.
this point he'd only met her friends like one or two times. And so that was weird to me too, cuz I mean even though they had been together for a short period of time, you would think that somebody that you're that in with, that you're engaged to them now, you would also be trying to involve them a little bit more and more, like a friendsgiving, a some kind of thing where they at least like talk. I mean, I know you've not maybe met Trevor in person like one or two times, but I mean, at the same time, like you see him, he talks to you kind of situation. So I just feel like it should have been something a little bit more
Well,
than
even
what it
like,
was.
my thing, I would have assumed, and maybe this is just me assuming and I shouldn't assume, but I would have assumed they would have done some sort of like engagement party or something at least, like where
Yeah,
they met
that's
each other's friends or something. You know what I mean? Even if it was like a one time big thing, at least met each other's friends one time in person, or even on FaceTime talk to them. But like he didn't do any of that until this picnic that she arranged. And
mhm,
really she only arranged the picnic because Elliot came back
Elliot.
into her life. So like it really was about Elliot. So it's just interesting to see like, but it also like once it also makes sense because she references like, does he really even have friends? Like is he also one of those people that sort of sets himself apart, doesn't, do a whole lot other than work and come home to his daughter and things like that. So I think in a way it was like showing us like them like their parallels and like how they're almost like the same person in a
Mhm.
sense. But I definitely agree, that was so weird. I thought, "He's never even met your best friend?" Even, like, on the phone call when you're on speaker, he doesn't what, you don't do that? What are we doing? But I kinda, at this point, brushed it off as, like, not that important because I was just, like, making the excuse for him that, like, she's constantly at work kinda thing. That's what I was thinking, like, she's like, an 80-hour work week because she's a resident. So I wasn't looking too far into it until we get later when she realizes, like, she also hasn't met his friends. That's when I was like, "Oh, okay, well, that's weird."
See, I kind of thought that it was almost like implied that he like bailed on some things in my opinion. It just felt like maybe she tried a couple times, like at least Sabrina tried to be like, "Hey, invite him, to coffee with us," or something along that lines, and he was just like, "Oh, I'm too busy. I've got stuff going on or whatever."
Okay.
So,
I definitely thought it was weird because, like, Sabrina has a daughter, he has a daughter, and
yeah.
normally sometimes, like, if one couple has kids and the other doesn't, like, that sometimes can be a little weird because some people are not in their, like, kids phase or whatever. So, like, but then for them both to have kids, I was thinking, well, that would be like a perfect double date. That'd be a perfect excuse to meet. Like, so that's what made it more weird to me once I realized, like, they both have kids, so, like, that makes it even weirder. Why would you not want the kids to meet or whatever? Which
Well,
Sabrina's
like
kid was a baby, but still.
I kind of wonder though if it had something to do with the age difference as well, since he was a little bit older. Like I wondered if he just like,
It kinda went over my head at first that he was that much older than her until we got, like, to where, later on in the book where everything finally is, like, reaching a peak, and she calls him a 42-year-old man, and I was like, "42? I didn't
mhm.
realize he was that much older than her." Like, that's a good significant amount older. That's what, 13-year difference? That's quite a bit.
Yeah,
Which,
yeah.
I mean, some people it works for and that's their business, but I didn't in my head, he wasn't that much older at first.
Well, I know that I think it was at the very beginning she mentioned that he was like stable and like he had kind of been through life already.
Yeah.
And to me, I almost read it not really as age, but like based on his life experiences, he's matured more, I guess you
Yeah.
can say. So I didn't read it at first as age, but I think it was later on, like you said, that it mentioned the age that I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe
Same.
they are a little bit older than what I'm thinking.
Same. I was like, I told Emily before we started that I made sure to mark it down so that when she got on this podcast and tried to say he was a certain age, I could verify that it was the right age.
He's 15, she's 30.
Yeah,
Okay.
like he's 54. Like I don't know what you're gonna come up with, but I was prepared just in case.
I'm sure there was something if I hadn't have read it. But honestly, whenever I was reading through it, I was like, I gotta pay attention to their age and like to figure out exactly what we're talking about so Carly can't say anything.
I did have to. I will say for the flashbacks, I had to be sure I understood how old they were in those because sometimes I was thinking, wait a minute, aren't you too young to be doing that, or aren't you too old to not have certain things like that? That I was like, wait, how old are they? I had to get
Yeah.
myself back to the right age a couple times.
I know there's a couple times where I didn't pay attention to whether it said then or now. So I got kind of confused. I was like, wait, what's happening? Because that's not where we were just left off with. But once I started paying attention to that a little bit more, it made it a little bit more easier to read and figure out where exactly where we were.
Well, and I will say, like we talked about, I think in the 2 episodes ago for the arc, that I did appreciate that chapter by chapter is how we jumped back and forth instead of in the middle
Hmm.
of a chapter or anything,
Yeah.
and we stayed in one perspective. I did appreciate that too. Although I would have died to have a bonus scene in Elliot's perspective.
It would have been nice.
It'd have been so sweet. I have no doubt.
Especially like I think seeing her on the floor after she comes back home, I think that would have been a perfect perspective for him.
Yep, I agree.
So we kind
I
of get
will
the scene
add,
where they meet up.
hang
Oh,
on, I jumped away from Sabrina. I love Sabrina, and I love the way Sabrina's like, I'm not telling you you should break up with this man, but I am telling you that I have never seen you happier than in this moment or whatever. We love like a supportive bestie that even if she doesn't agree with you, she still supports what you're doing, but also is still like, hey, but by the way, like this, I have a better idea that we could also do, Like, I don't know.
so
I like the way
she
she went
reminded me a
about it.
lot of you, to be honest. Like I was reading this, I was like, Carly would totally tell me this if I was in the same exact situation. I was like straight up, this is exactly how it would go. And you would literally call for an intervention or something too if I was going through something. Like I know you would. So I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's pretty much how it would go.
Well, I did like the way she went about it. Because like a lot of people are, I don't know. Like I feel like the way she was like, "Are you happy? Do you feel happy?" Like she asked her and like let her kind of come to that realization without just being like, "You've never been happy with him. You're miserable." You know what I mean? Instead of telling her
Are you
how she
calling me
feels.
out?
What?
Are you calling me out right now?
No, I'm not. What do you mean?
Because I'm pretty sure I've told you, like, you're not happy. You need to leave him.
No, I'm not calling you out. That's
Okay.
hilarious. I'm pretty sure you have told me that plenty of times, but I'm not calling you out. I'm just saying in
Okay.
general, I like the way she went about it. Letting her come to her own conclusions, but, like, putting her there, you know what I mean? But helping her get there kinda thing.
You should never set that expectation for me.
That's hilarious.
So I really did enjoy the little coffee scene.
I never even thought about it, but that's accurate.
As you were saying it, I was like, "Damn, okay."
Oh, that was hilarious.
Okay. So I really enjoyed the coffee scene or the coffee shop scene where they end up coming across Elliot and she's like frozen in place, which I do find it funny that she was able to identify this man by the behind,
Mhm.
basically. Like
Love
she
that.
had paid attention to that back several times to be able to point him out in a crowd, especially after 11 years.
That's true. She also, though, talks about her fiance's butt too, so she clearly enjoys the behind of men.
That is probably true. I did really like the quote that she said, and she said, "I wanted to see him every day, but I never wanted to see him again." And I'm gonna be honest, the entire time I was like, man, he must have been like cheating the entire relationship or something like absolute drastic, which I mean, don't get me wrong, it was bad. And I understand at her age kind of maybe constricting the two things when we get to that scene. I kind of understand it, but at the same time I felt it was a little maybe immaturity that kind of connected those dots. But I definitely didn't feel like it was like 11 years worth of cutting off a friendship kind of situation in the end. But
Which is what
uh,
he says also, and so when I read it, I didn't have that thought. Like, at the beginning, I thought, yes, like, he must have cheated, or I thought, like, he made this big deal about them getting together, and then something happened in public, and he denied he even knew her, or, something crazy like that, like, disrespectful of some level, or cheating or whatever. But then, like, when we actually got to it and he makes the comment about, "Was that necessary to cut me off for almost 11 years because of that?"
mhm.
I kind of thought, like, "Yeah, it was." Because, like, I don't know, we'll get into it later some, but it wasn't like a simple, like, I really thought she was just gonna catch him, like, kissing her at midnight or something, like,
Mhm.
that's really what I thought was gonna happen by the time I got to the end, and then it wasn't that at all, and then his excuse for it, absolutely no. So, I don't
Yes,
know, I just was we'll get, like, into that, but anyways.
I'm gonna be honest. The excuse, I'm still kind of fuming about that, and I try to
He had
overlook
to
it.
have, like, been drugged or, like, accidentally took drugs or, like, to be hallucinating, like, it had to legit be that serious, but it was never explained, so I was bothered by that.
So in the past perspective, we also get where when they start hanging out and they start reading and everything, they start talking about their favorite word. And I did really love that because it was almost like they were doing it whenever they were like catching up. So they were basically describing the time apart or like them seeing each other again. Like it was always a word that seemed to relate back to the situation either they were presently in or what they had experienced in their like recounting of what their events were
Mhm.
apart. So I really did like that. I thought it was cute. However, I do get the concept of what she was trying to do with like love and other words. I feel like almost like if the title was like love and favorite word or something like that, it would have made more context sense with the title and like kind of tied it in a little bit better. But I still think that the concept was really cute.
I agree. There were some of the words that I was a little confused, like, why we chose that word and not something else that would go along with, like, a love story. They were just, like, random words sometimes, but I did really love that concept. But that was super cute. And I loved, like, just, like, even, like, the little things when the words did correlate to, like, what was happening in that scene. Or,
Yeah.
like, I think the first one is, like, he's surprised she knows big words, or, like, something that, like, there's a little bit more to it even, not just the word that was chosen. I love those. Those are just cute little additions that really built, like, the characters, I feel like, and built their little love story.
And I think it also built their maturity a little bit as well because I mean, obviously, we get several points in here that was like a lot more mature than what you kind of are typically going through,
Yeah,
especially like with her processing her mom's death. So I think that that was definitely adding to the maturity level that they were at compared to some other kids their age. Which
I agree.
obviously, if you, I do believe that if you read and start reading from a younger age, you are a little bit more mature and a little bit more, I don't want to say educated. That's not really the right word, but at least like your concept of understanding is a little bit better, just because you experience so much in a book that you wouldn't in the real world kind of situation. But that's just me personally, in my opinion.
Well, and I think on top of that, like her losing her mom, like
Mhm.
trauma like that ages you also. So
Yes, yes. So after the meeting with Elliot, she runs away from him, which I did find very funny because she was like almost like so excited to see him, and then she like dashes away, and he ends up tracking her down because apparently his sister-in-law works at the same hospital that she does. And so I
so
do
cute,
find this really cute, however a little stalkerish, but
but a
also I'm
safe
wondering how that,
stalker.
yes, but I also wonder how in the world it came about. Like, did you randomly go home to your sister-in-law and be like, "Oh my god, I ran into her finally again," and she's like, "Oh, well, I work with her," like how did those dots get connected, kind of
Doesn't she
situation.
tell him what hospital she works at? Or did I just make that up in my mind to make it connect?
I don't remember ever. I thought it was really quicker than that, like their conversation.
I thought she said she was a resident at such and such, and that he knew his sister-in-law worked there, and so he asked if she knew her, and then she did, so she gave the number. That could be wrong though. I will say, while we're talking about this, I also loved how Elliot was like anti-technology. It was like instead of being on his phone, he was reading a book, or like he was so
Mhm.
present. I feel like with when they're together, one of my favorite things about him.
It doesn't look like he says, did you move back here? And she said, San Francisco. He's a physician and he sees her in scrubs and ugly sneakers. And she says, yeah, resident. And then
So maybe her
she,
scrubs had it on there.
maybe
I didn't realize how much the first couple chapters held of this story. Jeez.
quite a bit. I'm not sure, but somehow he ends up finding out and he ends up getting her at breakfast and talking with her at breakfast. Well, afterwards, she ends up kind of dwelling on the fact that she has never lost feelings for Elliot and how she feels about him. It kind of does this really like flip floppy between the past and present, with what she's going through is almost like gut wrenching, like I'm still in love with him, where in the past it's more like, oh my gosh, I'm falling in love with him.
Mhm.
And so it's almost like a comparison, almost like with two starting emotions, one being friendly, one being like, I don't really want to be his friend because I don't want to start falling back in love with him. So I thought it was really cool to like see that flip flop back and forth with it.
I
And it
agree.
wasn't as hard to follow as what I thought it was originally gonna be. Like, I thought it was gonna be like that the row before us was kind of hard to follow because it was two perspectives. You were going back and forth with like multiple emotions of like falling in love and then having the difficulty of like going through the space in her head with, traveling and all
In
that kind of
3
stuff.
timelines.
Yeah, it was extremely hard to follow, which this one had multiple years worth of stuff in it, but at the same time, it was so almost like it was perpendicular but parallel at the same time with what was going on. So it was really kind of easier to follow and kind of tread along with both storylines.
Well, and I was gonna say, and even in the past, when we, like, jumped several months ahead, it was always wrapped up really nicely. Like, it always
Yes.
made sense that we could jump that far ahead and miss those gaps. We didn't miss any, like, vital things. So, I do agree. I think this 2 timeline setting was done very well in this book. And I was the entire time in both timelines, I was eating it up. Like I was consistently wanting to read it again. I was like, I've got to finish. I literally read it in like a 24-hour period. I had to get done to the end. I had to figure out what happened. And we talked about this before, but considering when you're reading it, like there's not big moments really until the end. That means it's pretty well written, considering we were just reading little here and there moments that weren't even necessarily big moments, but just were cute or deep or whatever, like that we wanted to know what happened so much that we couldn't hardly put it down. That's pretty impressive.
I did really like the actual format of like the text messages and the emails as well. I thought that added more of like a easier, because like in other books, whenever they talk about, oh, I texted them this way, it's just like a simple thing, and it kind of, you overlook that whole thing. Where if it's actually like in that format, I was actually more intrigued to like read actually what it said instead of just like skipping over that part. So it was actually more interesting, I think, to me, and added more realism almost to the story, because it was almost like you were reading somebody else's actual story, and you're like getting the screenshots of their messages and stuff of how they fell in love. So I thought that was really cool.
The emails for sure, I think we talked about this before too, that it really helped set the timeline of like how far back we were jumping and how old they had to have been, when they were emailing and things like that. That did really well at setting that sort of timeline up just by saying that they were emailing each other. Things like that, just like these little details. They just did it was written really well in my opinion.
So also in the present, we are also getting where I did feel really kind of bad for Sean several times, but especially whenever she was laying in bed and she was considering like how she was still falling in love with Elliot and everything, and Elliot had told her that he had broke up with his girlfriend because basically like it was almost like the under the inception of like, we got together with the expectation if you ever showed up it was not going to last, kind of is how I read it.
Literally. I
And
love that,
so
and I probably shouldn't, but I love that he literally saw her. She ran from him, and what he did is go home with his girlfriend of 5 years.
I thought it was sweet, but at the same time, I felt bad for the other person too, because it was like,
Oh, yeah.
because I mean, you knew that there was something missing, I'm sure. But as far as knowing that, like, for multiple years, especially for her, like, I was falling in love with you, I was in love with you, like, we almost like moved in together, almost, it seemed like,
Mhm.
and you're just gonna like end it like that, and then especially the Thanksgiving thing, which we'll get to here in a bit, but like that really was just like, it was cringeworthy.
It didn't
I
really make
felt
a whole lot of sense to me. It
it's
just felt like a little added for drama, but it did like, what she was saying during that dinner and stuff, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but I'm sure we'll come back to that, but it just didn't. It
yeah.
was weird.
I also really liked the chapter in the flashbacks where Macy had gotten her period and she's reading the letter from her mom, and I did really like that the way her mom's letter read. I really loved how her mom had really put a lot of thought into what she would need at that time when she read the letter, or what her dad would
Yeah.
need to be able to go through something with her. I feel like she put a lot of thought into it. But I really love when she says, treat your body carefully, take care of it, don't let anyone abuse it, and don't abuse it yourself. Each inch of your skin I made diligently. Months I slaved over you. You are my masterpiece. And I just love that paragraph of
Yeah.
the whole thing, because I mean it is true. Whenever you you start your period, you're just like, oh my god, just I mean, still to this day, rip it out of me. But I mean, at the same time, like, I love that the fact that the mom was just like, "Hey, like, you're gonna hate it, you're not gonna like it, but it means everything's working right, and just love yourself anyways." And so I really love that. But then whenever Elliot comes in to like comfort her, and she just finally tells him what's going on, and he's just like, "You just tell me what you need, tell me what you want. I will go, and almost like, I'll fly to Timbuktu to get you like a piece of sand there if you need it." Like, it was just so thoughtful and so diligent. And I think that was something I just loved with Elliot, is she's so attentive, but at the same time, like, he was so, it reminded me a lot of her mom's letter, to be honest. It was just like, love yourself, but let me love you too, and let me give you my love that I want to give. It was just, he was very thoughtful about everything that he said, everything he did. It was very, very sweet.
Do you know who he reminded me a lot of?
I could not honestly guess.
Another one of our book boyfriends,
Reese?
Atlas.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
The entire time I kept thinking Atlas would do that. Atlas would do that. The whole time.
He would, honestly. Honestly, this is probably like very close. It is kind of very close, especially the flashbacks to kind of the relationship that they had, for sure.
Yep. I bet
So
Reese
in
would too, but he's not this soft. He's a little different.
Yeah, he was I feel like the devotional love after he got rid of his stone cold face, era, did would probably be close.
I just mean, like, I don't see Elliot, like, murdering someone to defend her honor, but
Yeah.
Rezan would.
Yeah.
So, that sort of thing. Between, like, a dark romance and like, a enemies to lover and a friends to lover, though, you know?
True.
Or fantasy in general, for being honest.
Most
Sorry.
fantasy anymore is I will kill somebody for you.
Favorite.
I really want to also talk about the chapter where Sean and Macy kind of sit down and they talk about her meeting with Elliot. And it was real weird. Like, he
I
seemed
agree.
too, like, I really honestly think whenever Macy says later on that she, like, I don't think he ever really loved me. He loved the idea of me, kind of. I mean, she didn't say those exact words, but pretty much the concept. But I
Yeah.
do think that it was just more so it was a convenience situation. And he was just kind of like, oh, it's fine, work on the friendship, do what you need to do. And it almost sounded like he was just trying to say something to appease her to get her in bed. And that really bothered me a lot. And at first I was like, oh, he's kind of being sweet, like, process it, it's fine, he meant a lot to you. But then it was like, do what you need to do, but right now I need you in this moment to basically have sex with me. And it rubbed me the wrong way, for sure.
It was a little weird. When he first said it, I definitely thought, wow, like, that's really mature response. Like, that's crazy. Who would ever say that? And then as we got to reading it, I kind of, followed along her thought process also of like, oh, he's not that serious about her. I think I think he really liked her. Wholeheartedly, I believe this, mainly because his daughter liked her. And I
Mhm.
do understand that certain aspect of like, I like you enough if you make my child happy and you're that mother or father figure for my kid and we get along and we work well together. I can see how it would be easy to get lost in that instead of having someone that's your actual partner and everything. But I did feel really bad thinking about, like, the daughter. I felt bad for her knowing she's about to lose, like, another mother figure, you know? I kept
Yeah.
thinking that if that was what was important to him, you would think he would have put up more of a fight about that, you know? So it was just really weird, but by the end, I was like, "Mm-mm, no, this is crazy. Like, this man does not love you. It needs you to be on your knees begging me not to leave you." Like, that if we're engaged, it was crazy. I
Mhm.
don't know.
I do think it would be the same concept of like Elliot did, though. If Ashley showed up at his front door, he would have left her in a heartbeat as well.
I
So
think
I do agree that
he
it was
admits
pretty
that
much.
though, which I thought
Yeah.
was he seemed very mature about the whole thing. I don't necessarily agree that he should have proposed to her just because his daughter made that offhanded comment and things like that, but he did handle it very well and was
Yeah.
honest and, so I mean, kudos to him for that part, I guess, at least.
I also found it really weird, though, whenever they got to the park and they were doing it, he like gets all weird and like jealous and like kisses
Kisses her?
her. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a really weird exchange because it was almost like he was like, I'm just kind of here for the sex, but then it was just like, oh, but you're mine. You're mine to have sex with, kind of situation.
See,
And so it rubbed me the wrong way.
I almost thought he might have done it to, like, see his response, like, as a test. To,
Okay.
like, gauge for himself by the end of it. When it very first happened, I thought, "What macho BS is
Mhm.
that?" But, like, after a while, I thought about it, and I kinda thought, "Well, maybe he was doing it to see how he would react, to see if how she would
Or how
react or
she would
whatever."
react. Yeah.
Yeah, and then, like because then we do see the rest of the time, he doesn't hardly engage with anybody. So, I don't know. But it was definitely weird.
I do feel like if it was like a jealousy thing, he would have been all over her the entire time
Me
and
too,
not
that's
just
what I
that
kept
very
thinking.
moment. So yeah, I agree that it's possibly a test. I think probably more for her rather than him.
Yeah, maybe.
But
I
I
thought it was
do
cute though that
also,
Elliot was, like, mad, but also trying to be respectful because, like, technically they're engaged, so he can't be that sort of I thought that was cute. I was like, "That's such a friends to lover thing that, like, in an enemies to lover, he would've, like, knocked you out for kissing her even if you were engaged." You know what I mean, though? It was, like, such a, like I don't wanna say
yeah.
soft, like, in a bad way, but it was such a, like, mild-mannered way to act, you know?
The comparison at the picnic, though, that Macy had in her internal thoughts as well was also very interesting. So, like, Elliot was just sitting there chit chatting away with all of her friends, and Sean's just sitting there on his phone playing with his daughter, very introverted. So, I do find that very, I don't know. I honestly just wonder if she was just looking for something in the moment to like just be okay with, that she so much overlooked so much behavior, because there's no way that he was just like not introverted so much the entire time. That, and honestly it seemed to make her uncomfortable
Agree.
how introverted he was. So it's kind of weird that in normal everyday thing without Elliot there, it wasn't ever uncomfortable, but it also didn't seem like they ever did very much together. Like
That's
going
what
to
I
the
think it
park
was.
to the zoo, I literally don't even think that they may have gone out maybe like 10 times in the same area. And if they did, it sounds like they just went like maybe went on a couple dates and then that was pretty much it. So
No, that's I totally think that's what it was. They didn't really do anything. And when they did do something, it was like a business thing for Sean. So he was in business mode, which is a schmoozing. It's different. It's a different aspect
yeah.
of somebody. And I think that she had never realized it until it was her friends who she knew how they acted in environment that she can relax in and the pressure's not on her. And then when she saw that and then had Elliot there to compare it to, I think that's when it really clicked for her. Um, but I don't even know that. So, like a lot of people, and we've talked about this before, I think, and maybe even on the podcast, but a lot of people use like the introvert as a bad thing. Like he's an introvert, that's why he didn't talk to anybody at the party or whatever. When I don't agree with that because I'm an introvert, and like if we were dating and you're going to introduce me to your friends, I'm going to talk to your friends. I'm going to attempt to get to know your friends because that's what you're supposed to do. There's a certain level of effort that you're supposed to put in. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to go above and beyond and be like seeking out every single one of your friends, but if your friend engages in a conversation with me, or if your daughter is playing with my daughter, like there's a certain level of some sort of interaction that you should be having and not just sitting over there on your phone. Like that is rude. That's not introvert behavior. That's rude.
No, I mean, I'm not really the type of person that likes like chit chat. Like,
Yeah, but you wouldn't
but
be
I'm not
sitting there on your phone at a picnic while your daughter's playing with somebody else's daughter and like not even
no, I
saying,
wouldn't
"Hey, my
I wouldn't
name's
be sitting
Sean."
there. Yeah, no, I wouldn't be sitting there not on my phone, but I mean, I would be sitting there listening because I'm more of like a watcher. I just like to like watch and like listen to other people interact and like maybe interject here and there kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I prefer the conversation not to be with me, just me there for the conversation kind of concept.
Totally agree. But that's what I'm saying is like there's still that level of effort of at least pretending to care about the conversation that you should at least initially put in when you first get to the picnic. Where he didn't do that at all. Like he pretty much sat in the corner on his phone, which and I do get there are some introverts that don't like groups, but this was like 6 people. Like and it was outside at a park. He could have been
Yeah,
playing with the daughter. Like Elliot was interacting more with the daughter than he was with his own daughter. You know what I'm saying? Like
yeah.
it was weird to me. I think that was what bothered her more than anything was like his lack of effort in actually interacting with her group. Not necessarily that he was introverted. I wouldn't have liked it either. I was like, what are we doing? Why did he even come? Send him home.
Well, and she does end up saying like, I think that it pretty much like I mean, not in exact words, but I think it pretty much decided that like Sean was not the person she was meant to be with, that she was just pacifying herself with Sean. It just, I think that I think if she had like more of an in-depth relationship with Sean, it would have made things a little bit easier. But I think that she was just like so surface level still with him, and even though they were engaged, I don't think they hardly knew anything about each other.
Which you
So
know
I
I don't
do,
like. I struggled with
yeah,
that. I was like, if we get into real great detail about this 2 months engagement, knowing they've known each other for literally 60 days and they're engaged and living together, I'm gonna be mad. So I was glad that was kind of it was talked about, but we moved past it. We didn't go in grave detail about it. Cause you don't. What's his middle name? What's his parents' name? What's his date of birth? You don't know those sort of things. Like I don't know. It was weird.
so in the past, I also really enjoyed the awkwardness that Macy and Elliot experienced. So, Some of it was she talked about how she found her dad's basically porn magazines
Was
and
hilarious.
yeah, and so she talks about that and she's like, "It's so disgusting." And he like almost like starts blushing and was like, "Well, I look at them too." And she's like, "Well, how often do you look at them?" And then she talks about how she got her first orgasm and he talks about how he got handsy with a couple different girls and she starts kind of getting jealous. And so it was just like a lot of like little moments that they obviously I think it was put into like almost say how much they experienced like in their lives together to like create that baseline like deep trust with them, because I mean a lot of those moments are big for a lot of people, and obviously in a friendship that's stuff that you talk about and stuff at some point. So I mean I think it just really like solidified that baseline relationship for them. But then whenever, especially after he says he's gotten handsy with a couple girls, that's whenever it started, I think, like inclining to a little bit more of a relationship, because she got extremely, extremely jealous. And I think, though, it also created a lot of that jealousy thing that she had going on, especially with the ex girlfriend, which I can't remember her name off the top of my head right now.
His back in the day girl?
Emma? Yeah.
Yes. Which she
Yeah.
wasn't his girlfriend, though.
No, but he had sort of like a thing with her.
They
So I
did
think
what was it? Shirts on, but hands?
no, I think they were she was the one that had the shirts off, the other
Was she
girl.
shirts off?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think
That's
that it
such a
just
weird thing to read about, thinking about your
yes.
awkward teenage years.
And I just really I hated that for her, that she had to like, because she also didn't want that relationship, so she was trying to keep that distance, which honestly a long distance relationship is extremely hard. I did that for like 3.5 4 years. Like it was so hard. So like to know that, I understand where she's coming from completely, to want to like keep that distance. And she basically was like holding out for that senior year where they graduated and she could be like,
Mhm.
yes, like now we can pursue something because we're together. But I definitely understand where she's coming from with how hard it could be. And it definitely is not easy, and I can understand where she's coming from. So, in the second half of the book, Macy is realizing that her fiance Sean isn't really including her that much in his life. And he tells her to figure out who she wants. Once she meets up with her friend Sabrina, she realizes that Elliot is who makes her live, and Sean is who is just keeping her alive. And she decides that she needs to break up with Sean. Macy also attends Elliot's brother's wedding with him, and after she admits her and Sean broke up. And during the wedding, Macy realizes that she wants everything with Elliot. After they get in an argument about the night 11 years ago, Elliot finds her on the floor of her house and she admits what happened finally to her dad. And in the past, Macy and Elliot continue to escalate their relationship and even have sex for the first time. Elliot is called her on New Year's and asks Macy to marry him. And when she gets there, she finds out he has cheated on her. When she doesn't answer, her dad comes and ends up being killed in a car accident, in which at the time Macy blamed Elliot for everything, which is why she hadn't spoke to him in 11 years.
The dad thing is really sad.
I know.
I kept trying to figure out what, like, make my own theories about what must have happened to dad. And as soon as we actually read the scene where dad tells her to go but call, and there was a reference earlier in the book about how dad found her or whatever at the cabin, I just knew. I was like, "Oh no. That's what's
Yeah.
gonna happen." Oh, it was really sad. Emily texted me and said, "The last like 100 pages of this book, you're gonna sob." So I saved the last 100 pages till I got home so that I could read it when I got home. And she was correct. I did sob.
As soon as I started reading, what was that scene? Oh, at the wedding scene with his speech. As soon as I read that, I was like, this is
Yes.
the start. And then I literally kept reading and I was like, it's not going to end. It's not going to end for her. She's going to
It
cry
was
this whole
so the speech at the wedding was so cute.
time. All
Should we
right.
read?
So her and Sean, it starts off the second half where she is in bed and Sean tries to get a little handsy. And I do want to read the part where he says, or she asks, "Can I ask you something?" And he nods, but continues to try to be handsy. And he says, "Anything." And she said, "Are you excited to get married again?" And as he's still trying to get handsy, he says, "Sure, babe." And she like balks at it. And she's like, "Sure, babe." And he's like, "Isn't it what you want? I mean, I've been married. I know what's great about it and what's not so great. But if you want it," and she's like, "Do you even remember how it happened?" And she talks about how Phoebe, his daughter, basically just says, "Hey, like, you guys married yet?" kind of attitude. And he's like, "Yeah, we should just get married." And that was how it happened. I think she even mentions that she doesn't even have a ring at some point as well.
No, she said that he was drunk and she thought they'd wake up the next morning and he wouldn't even remember it, but he did. And then she still doesn't have a ring.
Yeah.
We're not engaged. If I don't have a ring, we're not engaged.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry.
I honestly, until I got my ring back yesterday, I was just kind of like, yeah, I'm not going to tell people we're engaged until like I have proof of it. Cause I feel like the first instinct is
Correct.
like, look down at the finger and be like,
Then
where's it
where's
at?
the ring? Yep.
Yeah. And I didn't want to have to go through that explanation every time and be like, yeah, we're engaged, but I had to send it off to be resized. So, don't have it
Yeah.
yet. Sorry. Here's a
Yeah.
picture I took at like 10 o'clock at night of it.
I know. I was
But
the first thing I asked you was like, when are you going to post a picture of it?
yeah, which I finally did when I got it back and it fit my finger.
Yeah, you did.
But I do really like I said, where she basically says that Sean was keeping her alive, but Elliot's what made her feel alive. And you could definitely tell like the behaviorisms when she hung out with Elliot versus when she hung out with Sean. She was very reserved. She didn't really honestly talk much. It almost seemed like she was a side conversation to everything. It
Yeah.
was always Phoebe and Sean show, and then she was kind of like the backstage, person. And then whenever she's with Elliot, he always like, what's going on with you? Like, how are you doing? What's going on with your life? Like, tell me about you. It was always you, like you're the center of everything. And Sean was just more so,
Literally.
you're off to the side.
And I don't think
Obviously,
Sean meant it like as an insult. I just think that
no.
was his priority was Phoebe and
Mhm.
Elliot's priority was Macy. And I ate that up. Loved it.
He does end up telling her to figure out who she wants. And so she gets up, she leaves, and she goes to the couch, and she pretty much sleeps there until towards the end of the relationship. In the flashback, we also get where Elliot gets mad at her ignoring their first kiss. And in that same scene, she also asks about like jerking off, how that works. And that is such an awkward conversation. I was just like, I don't know if I ever, like, even a girlfriend at that age, I don't know if I ever even felt comfortable asking them any kind of question like that. So I just felt like it was real weird. But I mean, I guess they did talk about a lot of that kind of stuff. So I mean, I can understand where it got a little bit more like of a conversation, but still it was very, I cringed. I was like, I don't know if I would say that. So she also ends up meeting with, in the present sense, she ends up meeting with Sabrina and enjoyed that she gives the hard truth. So in this chapter, she gives the opposite of what she gave before. And I liked that because it was very upfront. But she gives her the the hard truth is, the point: I want you to be happy. I want you to see the spark I saw the other day. I want to see you blush when someone just looks at you. And she says, Sabrina, I have been happy with Sean. Just because I feel more overall with Elliot is when Elliot is around doesn't mean that those feelings are more valid or happier. And she said, really? Do you even know what happy looks like? I was wondering this the other day, actually. Had you ever seen happy before the picnic? And she says, you're joking. And Sabrina says, when Elliot walked up to us, swear, that was the first time I'd ever seen you smile like that with your entire body. And it made me question everything about your personality before now. And she says also, you think you're happy, but you're barely living. And so it was just like, almost like, I think that entire conversation was a wake up call that she was just like, that's true. Like, I've just been here without Elliot this entire time. So,
I think though, like the first part, like letting her sort of work through it herself a little bit, got her to the point that when she got those hard truths, that she was actually able to accept them and realize they were truths. Because I feel like if you just jump straight headfirst in with truths, and then she talks about it in here, like she gets defensive of Sean. Like it kind of changes the dynamic of the conversation if she's not really ready for the conversation. So I think like it was important to kind of build that up. But at this point, I do like the seeing her with Elliot as opposed to seeing her with Sean, like, I do understand why she was like, "No, like, I had never seen you as happy as I saw you the other day, and I just
Yeah.
that's what I want for you for the rest of your life." Like, it definitely came from a place of love too, so that's always important. That's crazy though. Can you imagine, like, realizing you've never seen your best friend happy?
Especially, like,
Even
questioning her
single?
whole personality because of finally seeing her happy, like,
Yeah, that was crazy to me. I thought, then this girl's probably needed help for years. Like, what have we been doing?
mhm. You should have been, like, searching down trying to find Elliot and who in the world he was, because obviously she's heard about him.
Yes, something.
We also get where Elliot and Macy has met up, and they're having a conversation about Sean. And Macy kind of briefly tells Elliot about Ashley and her drug addiction and the fact that she left them and everything. And Elliot kind of calls her out a little bit. And she says, "Are you staying because of Phoebe?" And she's like, "What?" And kind of implies, well, she's a sweet little girl without a mom. And she admits, which I don't think she realized it in the moment, but after the fact, she kind of admits what she said. But she says she doesn't need me. She's got an awesome involved dad. I'm this accessory. And as soon as she said that, I was like, she realizes what she is. She doesn't realize that because I do feel like when you do add another person to a father daughter relationship or even a mother child relationship or whatever, I do feel like it's a little hard at first, but I do feel like there is a way to absolutely include that person to make them feel like they're as much of the
Absolutely.
center as your child. And so I
Well,
do.
that's like the scene where I think that's right after the scene where she goes home and she cooks dinner for him, and he just complains the whole time anyways.
I think it may be after that.
Well, whenever it is. That scene where she goes home and cooks dinner and tries to be involved with them and insert herself into the middle of it, and then he's just complaining the whole time anyways.
Hmm.
I'd have been like, "Cook your own dinner then, fool."
Hmm.
This once I, like, finally realized that I wasn't happy, he's not truly in love with me, I'd have been packing my bags. I
Yeah.
could not sleep in the same bed knowing all that, or, like, even him sleeping on the couch or whatever. Mm-mm. No, I gotta go.
The part that bothers me is she has not one, but 2 houses she coulda ran to, and she chose the couch instead. I'm
She
like,
also has a
I don't care
friend
how
that she
long
probably
I have
coulda
to get
stayed
up.
with.
Yeah, and she kept using the excuse that it wasn't close to work, but I'm like, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't be sleeping on the couch at nobody's house.
I'd go to a hotel.
Yeah.
There's no way. Which I get he was sleeping on the couch, so she wasn't having to, but it's his house, like, you're gonna have to get out. Get out. And I feel like the longer you stay in, like, I don't know. I think one of the most important things is if you're there for the kid is ensuring that everything you do is in the kid's best interest. And
Mhm.
you staying with dad while you 2 are not in love and living the way you're living is not gonna be in the kid's best interest. It's not teaching Phoebe what she should be striving for, you know what I mean? So,
Mhm.
that bothered me too in that aspect, like, we claim it's about Phoebe, but it's not really about Phoebe because this is not in her best interest.
Yeah. Also, their breakup was a little weird, but at the same time, it was very mature and it was very much like just, I think, both admitting what they already kind of knew and they were just pacifying and
Yeah.
okay with. But she does ask, "Do you love me?" And he said, "I think I need the word between like and love, which means I hold her in a great esteem." I hold her in great esteem, Macy responded. And he asked, "Do you love me?" And she says, "I'm not sure." And he says, "Well, that means no." And she says, "I love you as a friend. I love Phoebes. I love how easy this is and how little it requires of me right now. But trying to imagine this for the rest of my life, it's sort of depressing. It feels like we're both headed down the path of least resistance." And it was a very mature conversation, but I think they both realized that they were just not in love, but they enjoyed each other's company was basically the way of
I think the way
describing it.
she put it is, like, that it was easy.
Yes.
That it worked for our day to day, little complication, little effort. That's what we both needed and wanted. And I think that's the best way to describe it. However, that wasn't really the best thing for either of them.
No. And then at the same point, we also get a little bit of in the past a relationship where kind of a turning point in my opinion. So Elliot gifts Macy some erotic literature to help her learn a little bit more about sex.
We know what you were
And
doing, Elliot.
well, he did because in the next scene that they get in the past, Elliot and her end up like having a grind session going on in the closet. And he ended up having to go home to change his pants though, because he got a little too happy. And so,
I love that he was so awkward about it and took off, and she's like, "Did I hurt you?" He's like, "No, the opposite,
yeah.
actually." And then she's like, "Oh, oh." I love how, like, awkward it is, like, and innocent because, again, little details like that that really, like, helped keep me in that timeline, and then when we jump forward, you know what I mean? Just written so well. Like, I'm
Well,
surprised we don't have very many complaints this episode. Did you realize that?
yeah, I mean, hardly at all, to be honest. I didn't have many things to say
That's
negatively in any
crazy.
way.
That's crazy.
Uh,
We might need to get checked.
Mark it on the calendar. So I do like though that in multiple instances when they talk about moving like to the next step in their relationship in the past, she does mention I would die without your friendship or I would fall apart without you or like different things like that because I do believe that's what happened for both of them when they finally did kind of separate and go their separate ways. They both talk about how they were not alive, they were not living, they were not who they were all this time. Like it was very much a empty thing. And honestly, for Macy, she lost everything when she lost Elliot. So, I mean, it was even harder, I think, on her, and she didn't really have somebody else to love and kind of like carry her on and keep her afloat kind of thing. And obviously, Elliot had a large family that was kind of impossible to be individualized and cared for individually as well.
Well, I was just about to say, so not only did she lose her dad and then also lose Elliot, she also lost like her second family that she had found in Elliot's family. So
Mhm.
she literally lost everything and had to up and move schools and everything changed. I will also say though, I secretly loved when she was talking about Sean was like the first guy that she didn't feel guilty about being with, and he said there was never one for me. I was like, the way he's like so in love with her and so obsessed with her that there's never been a day of his life that he's never thought of her and wanted her. I love that.
I know. I honestly, I really, now that you say that, you wish you had that chapter in his perspective. I really kind of wish that whenever he found her on that floor, it really was because I think at that moment we would have really got like that over. And honestly, I think that would have made the last 100 chapters even more hysterical, which would not have been good for you. But for the rest of us that didn't like hysterically cry, I think that it probably would have made it like 10 times better and probably made us all cry because I do think it would just been that overwhelming sense of like love and like so much from him that you had not experienced. You experienced slowly on Macy's end, but his would have been just like a gush of love all at one time kind of thing that I think would have built it
Yes.
up and just made that one instance better. And honestly, now that is the worst thing I think about this book is that it didn't have that chapter with his perspective, to be honest.
That's my only complaint.
Yes.
Is that I wanted his perspective at least one time. Even if it was like they're happy ever after at the end or whatever. I just wanted his perspective because we do like he is very vocal with Macy and like says how much he loves her and like he's really good at that. But it also would be like even more intense if we could get his thoughts and feelings. So I just would have really liked that. But the book is still really good. It doesn't decrease it necessarily,
No.
but if I had one little complaint, that's what it would be.
So Macy does go to Elliot's for Thanksgiving and he invites his ex and like a good friend of his. And first of all, odd, super weird. Secondly, then them like openly flirting in front of Rachel was super disrespectful.
Yeah.
It really, that scene was like the second one that I really just did not like. I really did not think that that was appropriate to have that moment, especially because Macy knew who she was.
I don't think they intentionally flirted in front of Rachel. I just don't think they were capable of not flirting. The same thing like with the picnic, like the way they interacted, like you could tell it was much more familiar than it should be with her having a
Yeah.
fiance and things like that. But I also think there could have been I don't think Rachel and her both should have been invited in the first place. However, he does make a fair point that Rachel knew she was invited and knew she was coming. She didn't know Rachel was invited or coming, but Rachel knew. And what did Rachel kind of expect? I mean, he broke up with you as soon as he knew he found her. Like, that's how much he's in love with her. So even if
Mhm.
she wasn't reciprocating, even if she wasn't flirting, you were going to watch him pine after her the entire time. Why would you do that to yourself? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's a certain level of, and then like, so I didn't understand Rachel's comments in this scene where she's like, he hasn't told you, or like, it was my business for 5 years. It was for sure my business for 1 year or something. That never was really fully explained to me. And maybe I read over it because I didn't care about Rachel. I don't know. But I was a little confused with like, why are you attacking her? Because she also was like, you ruined him. And even if I did, what is that your business? It was just
I
weird.
I think it was more so almost like a protectiveness over Elliot is what I took it as, of like, you broke him and I put him back together and now here you are to break him again, and like I don't want to have to pick up the pieces again is how I kind of
But
interpreted the
they
whole
were also
exchange.
18 years old.
Yeah, but I mean, she's only been it's now 11 years later and she's only been dating him for 5 and she realizes she's the one that kind of helped pick up some of the pieces in the meantime. So
But that's like something she should have a problem with him for, I feel like. Like, that's not Macy's fault.
yeah, but she ain't gonna see that. Especially how nice Elliot is. I'm sure he probably like respectfully broke up with her. Like Atlas, if he breaks up with somebody, he ain't gonna sit there and like he's gonna sugarcoat that thing. And so
Honestly, though, I was surprised he even had a girlfriend. Like, the Elliot even had a girlfriend because Atlas wouldn't have.
I think he just finally gave up on the idea that they'd ever run back into each other ever again.
I kind of was surprised he didn't, like, not hunt for her because that's not the right word. That's more of a dark romance vibe. But I was
My
kind of
question
surprised
is,
he didn't,
where's
like,
Facebook?
where's any social media? Where's the
Yeah,
public article that puts out that there's new residents or who graduated from medical like any of this stuff that exists in our world where you could find somebody? That's what I'm saying. Like, he could have easily looked her up.
because like my thing is even though Elliot is not like electronically, and maybe that's why they put that in there,
Maybe.
is like he's not electronically inclined to like go searching for her this whole time. He was just, but he also may just be a person of chance. Like he's like, if it's meant to be, we'll end up back together. And after 11 years I've kind of given up the thought that that's going to happen. So
Make it happen, baby. Nothing happens unless you make it happen. If you want her that bad, you'll find her. I wholeheartedly believe that.
I do also feel like it was put in there though, the Thanksgiving scene, for her to finally admit that her and Sean had broken up, because up to that point she hadn't really said it. Which honestly, it did never seem like a good time to say it without making it like, oh, now we're dating, or now it's like a thing.
Now we finna go.
Yeah. So I think up to that point it really was like weirdness for that to end up happening, because it really did. The minute that she tells him that they broke up, it just changed for him, and he's just like, oh, I've got the chance, like I'm gonna take it
Mhm.
kind of attitude. So I do think that it would have made things extremely awkward up until then if that wasn't there, to be honest.
Yeah, I think so too.
So when they arrive at the wedding and she gets invited up by Elliot's to go see his family, and I do love the scene whenever, I believe she describes it as it's like coming home, getting all the hugs and the love from all of his family.
I love the
And
way that his family loves her also.
yes, because honestly, she was only there probably collectively only a couple months, or even maybe a year at most collectively, from the time they bought it until then. And I think a year is honestly pushing it. So for them to like love her so much, but I think it's really just because Elliot loved her so much that they just like were like, she's just part of the family because he loves them so much.
Well,
It
that's
was
like
just,
Alex. She didn't hasn't seen her since she was 3 years old, and she still was just like, "You're my sister." You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, obsessed with the
yeah.
idea of it. So, I don't know.
So after their walk, because they kind of walk away from the family to give them a moment while they finish getting ready and stuff, and they go out for a walk and they're chit chatting and talking, and she ends up getting caught by Alex and set down. And I really do love that exchange with them. And I mean, she really didn't know Alex, so for the fact that they were able to kind of like pick up where they left off and really just have like that smooth transition, I mean, that spoke a lot honestly about Elliot's family, because
Yeah.
they all just like they hugged her for a minute and then they're like, "Oh, like what's going on with you?" You know, it was just like a casual, like just right back where we left off kind of moment. And I do think that that's where it made her feel really like at home and like at peace. And honestly, I think she didn't realize how much she missed that part of it either until then, because I mean, she'd been 11 years basically without any family. So to have that moment, I do think it was a really good moment with them.
I also
Um
thought it was funny how Alex was like, "No, we literally thought he was gay because he didn't bring girls home." And she's like, "Well, you met Rachel?" She's like, "Yeah, Rachel was okay. But the reality is like he's obsessed with you, and
yeah.
we all know it. And thanks for finally showing up because it's getting annoying." Like it's just a cute little like, little sister thing, I think.
I do absolutely love the aisle scene whenever he walks down the aisle and he's standing at the altar, and everybody turns to look at his sister-in-law walking in the room, and she just continues staring at him, and he kind of just looks over and she says like, the question in his eyes are playfully, what the hell is wrong with you? And she says, I don't know what else to do, so I simply mouth the word yes. Yes, I'm yours. Yes, I'm ready. Yes, I love you. And honestly, at that point, I was like, Carly's crying here. Like this is where it's starting. But then I think the next chapter is where like I was like, oh, okay, well, she's not crying yet because now it's weird. But when they have sex for the first time and the dad almost catches them, I was like, yeah, it's she's not crying yet because that just made it weird after that. But
Yeah, it is a weird little like chapter to go from that to that.
honestly, I think if it went from that straight into the wedding speech, you would have been crying starting there and just continue going. But I'm sure you teared up right there, and then you you read the next chapter. You're like, okay, no, and then you cried the next chapter.
Oh, I definitely
so,
cried for the wedding speech.
so after the wedding, then of course, like I said, it goes into the chapter where they have sex for the first time, and the dad ends up catching them. So awkward.
He had to have known.
I'm kind of wondering if the dad wanted it though, because he just like he kept not like wanted them to have sex, but like wanted them to get together. I said that completely wrong, but I mean, basically, I mean, the dad did put her on the pill, so like he knew something was like evolving with them, obviously. But I do
Yeah, but
think
he
that,
said this does not mean that this is a free reign to go do that, but I'm trying to protect your future.
but I do think that the dad really loved Elliot and really wanted them to be together. So I really think that that was kind of what it was all coming down to.
When he walked in that room, he had to have known.
Oh, 100%.
There's no way he did not know
Well,
something had happened.
it says Dad looked me over and smirked. So I think he kind of had an idea that something was at least going on. And yeah, so I think he definitely like had a feeling. So then we get back into the wedding, and I know Carly wants to give the speech that Elliot gave to his family.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Despite being born to the same parents and raised in the same house, Andreas and I could not have been more different. I was studious. He was athletic. I was obsessive. He was slovenly. I learned Latin. He primarily communicated in grunts and frowns. But anyone who knows us know we have one important thing in common. When we love for good. Which, yeah, I started tearing up right there. I drew a little heart beside that. But anyways, Andreas met Elsie when he was 28. Sure, he'd had girlfriends before, but nothing like this. He walked into mom and dad's house one Saturday and looked physically windblown. Eyes wide, mouth agape, Andreas had lost the ability to speak in his normal, very basic vocabulary. He brought her home for dinner, and you would think he'd invited the Queen of England. He nagged mom about what she'd cook. He nagged dad about not having the Niners game on the whole time. He nagged me about not doing something weird like quoting Kafka or performing magic tricks with my green beans. For a man who'd never voluntarily cleaned his own bedroom, this meticulous behavior was notable. And he's been as attentive and loyal and devoted for each day since. For 4 years, I've watched you fall more deeply in love. To say that Elsie is well suited for Andres is an understatement. Apparently, she loves meatheads. And apparently, she also liked us well enough. Elsie, welcome to our family. I can't promise that it will ever be quiet, but I can promise that you will never be so loved as when you come home to us. I was definitely crying in this scene. I was absolutely. Partially too because first of all, I love a good wedding speech that has part humor, part sadness. Like we've got that sort of mixture. That's always good. But also the way he looks at her while he's talking about some of it. And then the way he is like so nervous but is doing so well. I don't know. I just thought it was so cute. Like I just kept picturing like I don't know. It was in my mind, it was so vivid too, like, it was like I was sitting there watching the wedding speech. Oh, it was so cute, I loved it.
I really enjoyed that, like, afterwards, she just ran up to him and basically was like, let's get away, which of course they do end up going behind a tree and have sex kind of scene, which all I could see was the scene from Bridgerton, the first episode with Anthony and some random chick like against a tree. And I was just like, this is so weird. But that's all I could picture. I was
That's
like,
funny.
yeah.
That's also when she finally
Um,
says, for the first time ever, that she loves him, which I kinda thought, "Whoa, that's
yeah.
crazy," like, I never realized that she had never said it out loud.
I really wonder though if she ever said it like as a friend, kind of like that goodbye, but this was the first time she ever said it with like the meaning behind it kind of
Yeah.
thing. So into the then she ends up getting a phone call while she's at a party with her dad, and Elliot starts admitting he loves her and he proposes to her, which obviously he's
He's
so drunk.
plastered.
Yeah.
But what do you mean, "Will you marry me?" over the phone? I would've said, "No.
Uh-huh.
Try again later."
I also find it weird though that and I don't think if he was sober he would have ever asked her to like drive to see him in the middle of the
Agreed.
night. I definitely think that he would have not ever asked her to do that. But I do really I kind of teared up at the part where she's sitting there talking to dad in the car, and she tries to describe what's going on with him, and she says, it felt really bad tonight, the way the call ended, and I don't know what I'd do if something bad happened between us. Sometimes I wonder if we should just be friends so that I don't have to worry about ever losing him. And dad pursed his lips, thinking, so he's your Lace. And her eyes filled with tears at the sound of her mother's name, and she says, I haven't heard him say it in years. And he says, you're both young, but if he is that person for you, you won't be able to be just friends. You'll want to give him everything, to show him every way you love him. And he also says, I take any amount of time with her. I would have taken anything I could get. I don't regret one moment of loving her, even though it hurts that she's gone. And so I just, at that point, I teared up and I was like, I mean, and I just really loved that he understood too. He wasn't trying to like change her mind. He wasn't trying to like talk her out of it. He was just like, you go get him. Go figure it out, because no matter how much it hurts to lose, it's worth the time of loving in the meantime.
Well, and
So,
also, a lot of people would have been like, "Oh, you're too young to know what love is." And he said, "While you are young, if that is your person." Like he accepted the fact that she is old enough to understand and she like he like validated her feelings. Like if you feel that way, then those
mhm.
are valid and I want to be able to help you and do whatever I can to make this better. Like I really love that, especially for a dad. That was a really really mature way to handle the situation and I was actually very impressed.
Well, not only that, but he didn't have to use mom's letters that
Mm-mm.
time. So I thought that was really like, and honestly, that kind of broke my heart even more after we find out he passes. Like, I was just like, man, his last like big like loving speech to her was that he gave her his own advice and not the mom's. Ugh,
I'm gonna cry right now
broke
talking
my
about
heart.
it. The last 50 pages or so of this book, I like legit. I was crying so hard, like I was crying on the book and had to put the book away and just cry it out and then dry my tears because I was like, "You can't get your book wet. Don't do that."
Yeah. Yeah. It was so good. I just like the way that she wrote it to like almost just like every word it almost made sense, like literally even down to what's your favorite word, like it all
Yes.
just made so much sense into what was happening. And like almost like the what's the word I'm looking for, like the effectiveness of every plot of every, like even the flashbacks, the things like that, to like slowly build up what was going on and almost like compare what was presently going on with what was pastly going on. Like it was just so well thought out, and I just like every word I was eating it
I
up.
agree.
Like you said, I mean, it took me, I think it took me 6 or 7 hours to finish the entire book, like in one setting. Like I just could not stop. Like it was just, I wanted to know what happened. Also, I mean, the entire time I'm like, I think I know what happens to dad, but I wanted to just like find out what happens to dad
Yes.
at the same time. And then whether or not they were actually going to end up back together or not. I do have to say my biggest complaint was the fact that, you know, after they end up having sex behind the tree, basically, they have like a fight, and it was just, I feel like that may should have taken place a little bit sooner to kind of get a little bit more of effectiveness out of it. I do think that that was probably the one thing that was like illy placed to me. It could have been built up a lot more, where it was almost like maybe they were feeling like their heart was breaking all over again because they were going to lose each other all over again or something along that lines. And like Elliot almost like makes this big declaration of like, I'm not going to lose her again, something like that, just like to add a little bit more. Instead it was just like a chapter where they're arguing, a chapter where they're back together, and then happily ever after. So it was very rushed in that
I
sense.
didn't think
I think it could have been more
I
dramatic.
agree, and I didn't think it seemed like Elliot. For him to literally
Mm-mm.
say, "This is what happened. I was drunk, probably on drugs, and hallucinated." And then she gets upset, and then what he does is walks away and goes to get 2 more glasses of champagne to get drunk. Like, wait a
Yeah.
minute, you just said that was an accident, but here you are now, like, you know what I mean? So that to me didn't
Yeah.
seem to make sense either. I followed it okay and like it was all right. I felt like they needed to have that moment though. I definitely thought like things were going too smoothly, like something big had to happen, the explosive,
Hmm.
whatever. The third act breakup, then they get back together, whatever. Something had to happen. But I agree that I don't know that I might have a complaint with that as well. Just a little bit different, I think might have been more effective.
Well, and I do think that, I mean, just even maybe like 6 chapters sooner, it
Something.
would have added more. Because honestly, the breakup and they're like, I almost like took it as like a second breakup kind of thing that was happening. But I just feel like if it just happened like a little bit sooner, it would have made even more. Because I feel like it was so emotional, and then it was like so seriously heartbreaking, and then it was like so emotional again. So it was just kind of like a whiplash situation. And I feel like the ending could have just been like so emotional the whole time that it was like, I don't know. But I also feel like just the way it happened and like his cover up was just unbelievable. Like, to be honest, I mean, it, I basically just got so drunk and plastered that I thought it was you that was climbing on top of me, and then I like passed out. And then literally like he wakes up the next morning just completely butt naked with her not beside him in bed. Like I just feel like, and then did she not call you and be like, "Hey, like what we did last night, you know what I mean?" Like cuz he says it's like 2 weeks later and you still hadn't talked to me and I still didn't know what was going on or something like
I think
that.
he
And so
said
I
he
was
didn't
just
know
like,
till 2 or 3 days later what had actually happened, and by
yeah.
that point, she wouldn't answer him and whatnot. But then wouldn't you have went to like, I don't know, I would have confronted Emma and been like, "Bro, what happened?" Like, they're saying we slept together.
Or his buddies not saying anything
Yeah, it
either.
was weird, like, I don't know, I didn't believe him either, and honestly, like, it actually made me really upset and kind of not like him a little bit. Um, Made me a little
Mhm.
disenchanted with him because I was like, "How do you?" And it only talked about alcohol. So in my mind, it would have made more sense if he had like accidentally been slipped some like ecstasy or something, something that would make him
Yeah.
hallucinate, and then we could actually make that a plausible excuse. But he wouldn't hallucinate just being drunk. So that didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And then the way he acted like right after when she found him afterwards and he was drinking the champagne or whatever, and he was like, "You me take you home?" Like kicking her out in front of his family at the wedding. to me didn't seem like him at all
Yeah.
either. So there was sort of those last couple chapters I thought maybe could have been written a little bit differently. I did like that when she ends up going to the cabin, he is the one that finds her and like how quick he got himself together like wait a minute, what am I doing? But I didn't like his behavior in between there.
But also, he drove drunk to her house. Not a smart choice. So, in the past, we end up finding out that dad actually went to go find her because she had not called after she had discovered Elliot had cheated on her. And so he drove to get her, I guess is the best way of saying it, which of course dad was drinking. That was not a good idea, to be honest. However, my only question is why did they not stay there? Why did they not stay at the cabin? Why did he drive her
That's
home?
the part that I don't understand. I guess maybe because Elliot lived next door and he was like afraid he would try to come and apologize or like come seek her out. And so he thought best to take her home away. But that also didn't make a whole lot of sense to me either.
Well, and I hate too that whenever she talks about kind of what happened, she says, but his attention was on me. It meant it wasn't on the road. And so he basically was just like looking over at her the entire time. And
He didn't know what to do.
I could understand where, yeah, and I kind of understand where some of that guilt may have come from on her side of the fact that like she was so irate and she didn't think it through and didn't think to call him or anything like that. So it was almost like her fault that it happened, but then she also like I think it's almost like an escape mechanism, didn't blame herself completely. She more so blamed Elliot for putting her in that situation where she drove there, forgot to call her dad, and then found, him cheating and all that kind of stuff. So it was just like a chain reaction
I
kind of
agree.
thing. But it was extremely, extremely sad moment for
Yeah,
sure.
wholeheartedly. I had to put the book down again and sob my eyes out and then dry them to be able to keep reading.
Yeah, she sent me a voice memo after she finished the book, and I was like, "Man, you sound remotely calm for like what I thought was going to wreck you." And she was like, "No, it did. I just had to take a moment before sending you that voice."
Yeah.
So, after everything kind of happens and she explains to Elliot what actually happened to her father, and I actually teared up at the part where she says, I realize whether or not you had something casual or inconsistent with Emma, you really did love me. And he said, of course I did. And I hate that Duncan died thinking otherwise. And I hated that because, like, he really did die thinking that she had just had her heart broken by the love of her life kind of situation. I hated that.
Me too.
But then after he processes it and they talk about how he says that he was saying goodbye to the closet and he says, but I want us to move past this closet. This closet isn't why we fell in love. We made this room special, not the other way around. And he even says, I bet the way you see it, everything fell apart when we try to live on the outside. But that's just shitty luck. It isn't going to be the way this time. And they talk about kind of what their future is going to look like. And I love the last line of that chapter that whenever she asked him to go help her clean out her other house that she hadn't been back to, he says, I've been waiting for you to come home for 11 years. I'll go anywhere you go. Love
Me
that.
too. I was kicking my feet.
um, and I do love the absolute last chapter that they're setting up their house. They've cleaned out her homes and they have decided to move in together. And I love that Elliot's entire family is there helping them move in. And he asks her kind of after they kind of get their moment alone. And he says, what's your favorite word? And I love that the whole last word of the book is you.
Mhm.
Love that.
Me too. Super cute.
So, what is your final thoughts and rating?
So, I think I would probably give it a 4.8 overall. I really enjoyed
Okay.
it. There were a few things, like we discussed throughout the episode, that I might have changed just a little bit, but overall, loved both main characters. Loved how I literally could not put the book down. Like, even though some of the chapters were, like, just mundane, simple things, I still wanted to finish it and get to the next. Like, it was so good. I love the clarity between the timelines. Love the way that we built the characters as we went through it. It was overall such a good book. So, yeah, that's definitely a 4.8 is definitely my rating. What is yours?
So I actually gave it pretty similar, a 4.7. Like I said, my biggest thing was I feel like the secondary breakup and the description of the first breakup that kind of correlated with that, I feel like that should have been kind of a little bit earlier. I mean, not even if she would have just literally put it like maybe 5 chapters earlier, I think it would have just had more of a dramatic effect of like, oh my gosh, this may not work out. They may not get there forever, for a second time kind of thing. But obviously, because it was towards the end, it almost just like the only way it could have gone at that point was happiness because it was so few pages left. And so I just like that was my biggest complaint with it. And then now that you have actually pointed out like not having his perspective and finding her on that cabin floor, it would have added a whole different level, I think, of that book. And I really think that I would have full on hysterically cried if I would have had something like that. But I just kind of teared up here and there. So I think that it really could have added that whole different element if just that one little detail was definitely there for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So, if you liked this episode or any of our other episodes, please subscribe to get access to bloopers, extra content, and more on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Patreon, YouTube, and just about every other platform that you can listen to podcasts on.
You can also send us book suggestions, comments, or general inquiries to our email at likewereadthem@karlempodcast.com. You can also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. We do have every Monday a discussion group where we post a question. So we love for you guys to interact with us. And also, we announce our books a month in advance so you guys can read along with us. So that is all on our Facebook page, Instagram, as well as TikTok. We do make posts and different things about us personally, as well as some other books that we're also reading outside of the podcast. So we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely. In the back of this book, actually, there are some discussion questions. We may or may not post them on our social media. Either way, feel free to send us some thoughts to any of them. We'd love to engage in a conversation about it. So, we appreciate you tuning into this episode and lasting this long. Next week, we'll be discussing Beach Read by Emily Henry. I am super excited for this one as well. But,
I have not read it yet,
oh,
so I can't tell you how.
okay. Well, here's the little blurb on the back of the book.
It's this weekend, I promise.
So, Augustus Everett is an acclaimed author of literary fiction. January Adams writes best-selling romance. When she pens A Happily Ever After, he kills off his entire cast. They're polar opposites. In fact, the only thing they have in common is that for the next 3 months they're living in neighboring beach houses, broke and bogged down with writer's block. Then one hazy evening, one thing leads to another, and they strike a deal designed to force them out of their creative ruts. Augustus will spend the summer writing something happy, and January will pen the next great American novel. She'll take him on field trips worthy of any rom com montage, and he'll take her to interview surviving members of a backwoods death cult, obviously. Everyone will finish a book, and no one will fall in love. Really? This is such a cute read, so you should definitely tune in next week. As always, we promise to Carl and like we read them.
Theme song.